Are we living in a simulation? The question seemed ludicrous. Nonetheless, many intelligent individuals believe that this is not just plausible, but even likely. The theory that the world we see is an illusion supplied to us by sophisticated computers, popularized by the Matrix films, is insane enough to be taken seriously. But, if we're being serious, we need to distinguish between two quite distinct problems. Could there be a highly experienced mental world that is comprised of abstract data rather than matter, as it appears to be? Is the world we actually live in the universe as represented by physical laws and cosmological facts such a reality? The answer to the first question is almost certainly yes. In truth, people spend an hour or two each day in self-generated mind worlds when we dream during REM sleep. The objects we perceive in our dreams are simply electrical excitation patterns in our brains. Virtual reality, on the other hand, tunes us into data streams that we see as things. Dreams are fleeting, and virtual reality is not yet an all-encompassing experience. We humans continue to spend the majority of our lives in a shared world, where we do things like eat, drink, and age. Many scientists believe that one day, artificial minds built entirely on electrical circuitry will be able to imitate human mental processes, including self-awareness. Such artificial brains, living in programmed universes, may be unaware of physical reality, although being entrenched inside it. The core Matrix fantasy isn't new. It is a computer-age variant on the philosophical concept of idealism, according to which so-called physical reality is fundamentally mental rather than material. According to the 18th century philosopher Bishop Berkeley, the universe reflects activity and God's thought. At least one of the following three choices is correct. 1. All human-like civilizations in the universe become extinct before they develop the technological capacity to create simulated realities. 2. If any civilizations do reach this stage of technological maturity, none of them will bother to run simulations. Or 3. Advanced civilizations would have the ability to create many simulations, implying that there are far more simulated worlds than non-simulated ones. We don't know which of these is correct. What if everything around us, the people, the stars in the sky, the earth beneath our feet, even our own bodies and brains were all a ruse? What if our reality is really a hyper-realistic simulation, and we're all just characters in a sophisticated computer game? But other physicists and philosophers believe we may be living in a simulation, even if that means abandoning all we know, or think we know, about the cosmos and our role in it. If we are living in a simulation, the universe we see is only a fraction of the sum of physical reality. The concept of a superior creature constructing a simulated cosmos is analogous to the concept of a deity creating the world. If the simulation hypothesis holds true, there is a creator, an architect, someone who planned the world. It's an old notion reimagined in terms of mathematics and science rather than just religion. Who or what is the godlike entity suspected of creating a mimic universe? According to believers of the simulation idea, it may be a race of advanced creatures, space aliens. Even more perplexing is the prospect that it is our own offspring, our future selves, who are responsible. That is, humanity living hundreds or thousands of years in the future may have the capacity to recreate not just our planet, but also the bodies and brains of the beings that inhabit it. Just as you can imitate anything else, you can simulate brains. True, we don't currently have the technology to pull it off, but there's no conceptual impediment. And after we've created sufficiently complex and precise brain models, it's likely that those simulations might induce conscious experiences. Will we ever find out if the simulation theory was correct? There's a slim probability that we'll come upon a noticeable error in the simulation one day. More practically, scientists have proposed tests that might provide proof that our universe is mimicked. Some have asked if the universe is intrinsically smooth, or if it is made up of separate chunks at the tiniest sizes, similar to pixels in a computer image. If we establish that, what if we were able to prove that we were living in a simulation? How would people respond if they discovered that our reality, ideas, and emotions are nothing more than a computer's zeros and ones? Some believe that such information would destabilize our life by undermining our feeling of purpose and squashing our initiative. Others fear that data supporting the simulation idea will arouse a new concern, that the creators will tire of the simulation and turn it off. Reasons why we might be living in a simulation. Some individuals claim to recall seeing television coverage of Nelson Mandela's death in the 1980s, despite the fact that he died in 2013. The Mandela effect is therefore purportedly proof that whomever controls our simulation is rewriting history. Alternatively, there is proof of parallel worlds, and some people have crossed from one version, where Mandela died in the 1980s, to ours, where he survived to the age of 95. Some recall the name of the Berenstain Bears children's book series being spelled Berenstein, while others recall a non-existent 1990s film named Shazam, featuring the comedian Sinbad as a genie. We've spent billions of dollars sending probes into space, so we should have uncovered proof of alien life by now, right? Not so fast. Aliens would most certainly be considerably more technologically sophisticated than we are. Thus the fact that we haven't found them implies that we live in a simulation they've worked out how to escape from. Perhaps the computer we're in only has enough RAM to mimic one planetary civilization at a time. DNA containing a computer virus. An interdisciplinary team of researchers from the University of Washington demonstrated in 2017 that they could insert dangerous computer code into physical strands of DNA. Their goal was to demonstrate that computers used for gene sequencing were vulnerable to assault. However, they may have unwittingly disclosed that what we consider to be biological reality was all along computer code. What about climate change? Our society is, coincidentally, on the verge of environmental collapse, implying that we may be an ancestral simulation developed in the hopes of teaching our founders how to overcome an energy dilemma. This argument overlaps slightly with the aliens as simulation quitters theory discussed above. If we discovered an inventive solution to the climate dilemma, extraterrestrial creatures may return to borrow the results. Realistic-looking video games. As a result, statistically, we are most likely living in a simulation right now. According to Musk, the fact that video games are so hip these days is more proof that we live in the Matrix. 40 years ago, we had Pong, he explained in 2016. There are two rectangles and a dot. Now, 40 years later, we have photorealistic 3D with millions of people playing at the same time. If any rate of advancement is assumed, the games will become indistinguishable from reality, even if that rate of advancement is reduced by 1,000 from what it is currently. It's a foregone conclusion that we're on a path toward games that are indistinguishable from reality. Computer code quarks. Theoretical physicist James Gates claims to have discovered what looks to be genuine computer code contained in string theory equations that describe the basic particles of our cosmos. He claims to have discovered error-correcting codes that these are what make web browsers operate. So, how did they get up in the equation I was working on involving quarks, electrons, and supersymmetry? Why is it that our universe has rules in the first place? According to MIT cosmologist Max Tegmark, our universe's stringent laws of physics may be evidence that we live in a video game. If I were a player in a computer game, I would also soon learn that the rules appeared perfectly rigid and mathematical. The speed of light, the quickest pace at which any particle can move, reflects the speed limit for conveying information within our simulation's network. According to this hypothesis, it is not possible to prove that we are not living in a simulation. It may be easier to prove that we are living in a simulation than it is to establish that we are not. Nuclear physicist Zahra Devadi believes that cosmic rays, the most intense particles known to man, would look as pixel-like bits if we were in a simulation, and as endless beams if we were in reality. Meanwhile, new philosopher David Chalmers believes it is impossible to establish that we do not exist in the Matrix. You're not going to obtain proof that we are not in a simulation, since any evidence that we acquire might be simulated. It's more logical than ghosts. Paranormal occurrences are neither hauntings or encounters with aliens, but rather flaws in the simulation. This notion is the most popular on Reddit sites like r, Are We Living in a Simulation, and r, Glitch in the Matrix, where users delve into the minutiae of the strange or occult. A shop appears in a town one day, then disappears the next. Possible explanations include a slip between parallel timelines or a pop-up. As if entering a new level of a video game, a vehicle passenger notices the word render in the sky. Elevators are a common location for glitch stories. The jump between levels appears to foster dimensional slippage. We're already good at simulating things, and we're getting better. The Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics linked 8,000 computers in 2014 to build a 350 million light-year simulation of our cosmos that was digitally aged over 13 billion years. The fact that the Sims video game brand sold over 125 million copies in its first decade demonstrates that we, too, enjoy playing with simulations. If a future version of mankind discovers the capacity to make more realistic simulations, it would not be surprising if they choose to employ it. Many works of science fiction, as well as some genuine engineers and futurologists' predictions, anticipate that massive quantities of computer power will be accessible in the future. Assume for a minute that these forecasts are right. Later generations may use their super powerful computers to create comprehensive simulations of their forefathers or persons similar to their forefathers. Because their computers would be so powerful, they would be able to perform a large number of such simulations. Assume that these simulated persons are aware, as they would be if the simulations were fine-grained enough and a particular commonly accepted stance in philosophy of mind is right. There is also the prospect of simulators emitting some sections of simulated creatures' mental life and providing them with fake recollections of the kinds of experiences they would normally have had during the missed time. If this is the case, one might explore the following fanciful answer to the issue of evil: there is no pain in the world and all recollections of suffering are illusions. Of course, this notion can only be properly considered when you are not already suffering. What are the ramifications for people if we live in a simulation? Despite the above observations, the implications are not all that radical. The conventional scientific examination of the cosmos we observe is our greatest pointer to how our post-human makers opted to build up our reality. Most of our belief networks would undergo minor and subtle changes as a result of our lack of faith in our capacity to comprehend the ways of post-humans. When properly understood, the reality of 3 should not cause us to go crazy or prohibit us from going about our business and making plans and forecasts for the future. 3 appears to be the most empirically significant at the moment. As a result, reality may have several layers. Even though the hierarchy must bottom out at some point, how the metaphysical status of this assertion is rather murky. There may be capacity for a vast number of levels of reality, and the number may increase with time. One factor that weighs against the multi-level theory is the high processing expense of the base mental-level simulators. Even simulating a single post-human society might be too costly. If this is the case, we should anticipate our simulation to end just as we are about to become post-human. If our universe is a purposeful simulation, we may have to be concerned about being monitored by entities who reside on higher levels of reality. As indicated in 2, we could also be concerned that they will cease simulating us, whether purposefully or unintentionally, but there isn't much we can do about it except perhaps to let them observe us and endeavor to remain amusing. If the simulation is faultless and operates on traditional computer power, it is very evident that no defense against external observation is feasible. Indeed, assuming this is the case, classical procedures can replicate quantum occurrences in our environment. As a result, any information may be duplicated at whim by the simulators without disrupting the simulation and hence without notice. In fact, we do exactly this when we play video games or run most of our physics simulations. We would not only be unable to rely on quantum effects, but we would also be unprotected by the no-signaling constraint 5, since the distance between two places in the simulating system and the development of the simulation may be radically different. The fact that perfection is so difficult to acquire works in our favor. We might be able to figure it out if the simulation is classical but incomplete. Computing failures, as seen frequently in video games, may have a significant influence on a simulated environment. To demonstrate this influence, consider collision detection problems, which are still common despite recent games increasing realism. When two objects that should clash pass through one another, the ensuing clipping might disrupt the player's immersion. The converse mistake, in which an object's path is obstructed even when there is no impediment, can be much more severe, potentially halting game progress. Such flaws resulting in inconsistent rules of physics may be detected inside a simulation. Even if the physics principles are precisely encoded in the simulation, every real system is flawed and can be influenced by its surroundings. Radiation flipping bits in a computer's physical memory is an excellent example. If the error correction systems in place are inadequate, this sort of inaccuracy might have an impact on some simulated physical processes. Furthermore, if these mistakes are frequent enough and influence the simulating system in a non-uniform fashion, for example, a portion of the system may be more exposed to the radiation source, it may be able to receive information on the simulating level from inside the simulation. What if the world we live in isn't real? Could it be that the screen you're looking at, the air you're breathing, the earth beneath your feet, and even the tiny particles that comprise your body do not exist? Is it feasible, even likely, that the chaos we see around us is the outcome of a sophisticated computer simulation? That we are only extras in someone else's game? The chance of us existing in one of the billions of historical simulations appears to be almost certain. Otherwise, post-human cultures would have no motive to simulate histories, or would never have the technical competence. On the surface, the case for simulation appears compelling. Pong, a simple 2 pixels and a rectangle, was the pinnacle of technology 40 years ago. Now, we have photorealistic graphics, deepfakes, and virtual reality at our fingertips. It appears certain that future civilizations will advance much more and may be able to recreate circumstances from their distant past. With so many conceivable outcomes, it's tempting to feel we're living in a simulation rather than the actual world. Even before getting into the scientific concerns, this argument runs into a few roadblocks, such as the premise that such a future civilization could ever exist, or that the species would wish to replicate humans, Earth, or even this galaxy. It's as probable as the presence of God or the multiverse absolutely possible, but scientifically useless. This argument is also influenced by our understanding of physics, space, and time. When Isaac Newton discovered the laws of motion over 300 years ago, philosophers likened it to one of the most exquisite scientific advancements man has made: clocks. The universe's rhythm, both on Earth and in the stars, was so exact that the connection seemed clear. Scientists have spent many years trying to comprehend the beginnings of the cosmos, either by examining the extremely huge or the very small. The Big Bang and the cosmic background radiation it left behind are the best explanations for the cosmos in physics. Evidence that this has been mimicked, on the other hand, is few. We glance at the subatomic instead of the stars. Where would we find the gears of the cosmos if it were a clock? Where would the pixels of the cosmos be found if the world was a simulation? Both gears and pixels have the property of being discrete. In mathematics, this indicates that they are separated from one another, with each portion different from the others, similar to Lego bricks fastened to their foundation. A massive Lego sphere may appear flawlessly smooth from a distance, but closer inspection reveals these individual bricks. As far as we can tell, the cosmos is not like Lego or Grand Theft Auto. People do not resurrect. Trains are not hat-wearing NPCs. On the surface, it appears that everything is in order, but video game characters are not performing the necessary research. It is plausible that the cosmos has a pixel, but existing scientific understanding is insufficient to investigate it. The Planck length is one of the smallest scales we know. This is the length of the cosmos after the first 1043 seconds of the Big Bang as it expanded. Unfortunately, the Planck length is 15 orders of magnitude more than anything we can currently test with the Large Hadron Collider. and would still be insufficient to confirm the existence of dark matter. However, philosophically, whether we are in a simulation has little bearing on our actual existence. Descartes provided an analog form of the simulation in his Meditations, the presence of an evil demon capable of creating a flawless illusion of the universe, overloading humans' senses of sight, touch, taste, sound, and smell. The evil demon, also known as Descartes' devil, malicious demon, and evil genius, is a key epistemic idea in Cartesian philosophy. Descartes imagines an evil demon of utmost force and cunning has utilized all his powers in order to fool me in the first of his 1641 meditations on first philosophy. This wicked demon is thought to give a perfect illusion of an external world, allowing Descartes to state, "I shall think that the sky, the air, the earth, colors, forms, noises, and all external objects are only delusions of dreams concocted by him to entangle my judgment." Descartes arrived at one required fact by employing the method of doubt, the cogito I think therefore I am. Because he may question, he must be a thinking entity, and to think, he must exist. I exist as long as I believe I exist. The evil demon cannot trick me into believing otherwise. The cogito must be true since it is a clear and distinct thought. To be clear and distinct in one's thinking implies to be open and present to the attentive mind. Descartes devised the concept of God, a non-deceiver who has provided him with a means of arriving at correct beliefs, in order to get at a truth with confidence. Descartes is certain that God exists and that the idea of God came from God himself. All ideas have the same degree of formal reality, whether the idea is of a finite or infinite substance. Some things are on a higher scale of formal reality than others. For example, God would have a higher degree than human. The presentational reality of an idea is the amount of formal reality the idea has. Descartes states that the idea of God, who is eternal, infinite, omniscient, omnipotent, and creator of all things other than himself, lies on the highest degree of presentational reality. Therefore, God has a higher formal reality than Descartes' idea of God. God is seen to be omnipotent and omniscient. He is seen to be perfect. In 1968, James Cornman and Keith Lehrer proposed the Braino machine, which operates by altering the brain of a patient wearing a special cap termed a Braino cap. When the Braino cap is placed on a person's head, the operator of the Braino can impact his brain in order to generate whatever delusion the operator desires in the subject. The Braino is a contraption that generates hallucinations. Its hallucinations can be as full, methodical, and cohesive as the operator of the Braino wants them to be. Gilbert Harman stated in the opening of his 1973 book Thought, "It can be proposed that you have not the smallest reason to assume that you are in the surroundings you suppose you are in." Many hypotheses could explain how things seem and feel. You may be sleeping and dreaming, or a playful brain surgeon could be giving you these experiences by activating your cortex in a unique way. You may be sprawled out on a table in his laboratory, with cables flowing into your skull from a giant computer. Maybe you've always sat at that table. Perhaps you are not who you appear to be. Such scenarios have been used numerous times in science fiction, but in philosophy, it is now common to refer to being like a brain in a vat. After Hilary Putnam produced an argument purporting to show that the supposition that we are actually brains in a vat, although it violates no physical law and is perfectly consistent with everything we have experienced, cannot possibly be true. Would it really make a difference if that were true? The simulation argument has no influence on the experiments that scientists do in physics. You're told you're in a computer simulation, which seems like a huge issue, but how should it impact the kinds of physics experiments we perform or the ways we try to comprehend the universe around us? The answer is about zero. Japanese academics have constructed a computer replica of the cosmos for anybody to explore, Delta-Q, which means outer space in Japanese. It doesn't have any humans in it, but it's said to be the most realistic simulation of the universe to date, and it's intended to assist scientists investigate how the universe formed. In addition to anecdotal evidence, Experts have attempted to quantify how long it would take to arrive to the point when pressing a button results in virtual life. There is disagreement over the size, but scientists agree that the duration is finite, with the exception of some who claim it is impossible. That is, if it occurs, whenever that may be, the forsaken day will exist somewhere on our chronology. Could you get yourself out of a simulation? One of the first questions we could have is, if we realized we were living in a simulation, would we be able to escape free? How we perceive the likelihood of breaking out may be influenced by how the hypothesis is originally expressed or phrased. Breaking out in the Matrix is as simple as swallowing the correct drug. The protagonist, Neo, is given the option of swallowing the red pill or the little blue tablet. Neo takes the red pill and meets the lovely Trinity. On the plus side, the red pill permits him to exit the simulation and return to reality. If only it were that easy. Of course, there's also the issue of what we burst into. The actual reality we find ourselves in may be comparable to or vastly different from our simulated reality. The actual world in the Matrix isn't all that different from the artificial reality, only it's a lot more wrecked. But things may become strange. Are there simulations within simulations? Perhaps we'll just wind up in another simulation. We may end ourselves confronted with a more complicated simulation, one with different natural laws, one in decay, and so on. Perhaps there are simulations inside simulations, similar to a Russian nesting doll, or overlapping or coexisting ones. Perhaps some simulations are even worse than the Matrix in many respects. Would the type of simulated world we live in, if we do, reveal anything about who would produce the simulated reality? What are the options here? Is it a wicked demon, an extraterrestrial mind, artificial intelligence, or our own transhuman descendants? For starters, we would have no idea whether there is only one simulator, or numerous, or a collective mind of some kind, or whether it was purposefully created to be this way, or whether it is an unintended consequence. We also don't know if the creators are still alive. Perhaps they or it went on to new projects or died or became something else. Maybe it merely put up the foundations to make it work. What do you think? Leave a comment stating your opinion and observations.